All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh with Saving Green, and really special day today. I have Paul, my neighbor, who is our pool expert, the guy who's been handling and taking excellent care of our pool for the last 4 years or so. And a lot of you have asked for updates on the copper ionizer video that I put out last year and kind of how it's been working out over the last year or so. And I thought, who better to ask than Paul, who handles a bunch of pools in our area and has a lot of experience, and initially was the one who recommended the copper ionizer way back when. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And I guess to get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience with pools.
All right. Yeah, I've done pools for about 25 years. I have about 100 that I do every week. And it's a good job. It's a nice gig, if you know what I mean. It's a good gig.
And just tell us about your typical methods that you use to assess and measure water quality.
Well, the first thing you do when you walk up to a pool, you see if it's leaking or if they've been adding water. See how clean it is from your previous cleaning. And then in the summertime, we do more chemicals than the wintertime. So I use the 7-in-1 test strips to see where my levels are, and normally all the chlorine is burned out after a week. So they normally get 1 jug of chlorine. Last year I was using tablets. This year I'm not using tablets because they're so expensive. And keeping the stabilizer at about 50%.
And what prompted your initial use for these copper ionizers last year?
Well, I saw a video online about a guy who made a homemade one. And it worked so well for his pool that I made a bunch of them myself, and I put them in a lot of my pools. And they'd work for a period of time. The pools looked crystal clear, but then the wires would break and all that. So I knew they worked, and then we ran into a stabilizer supply issue last year. So since I couldn't get stabilizer, I had to rely on another product. So I contacted about 40 of my customers, and we used 40 ionizers approximately in about half of my pools.
Do you find a difference in that chemical ratio between these freshwater pools and saltwater pools, if you manage any saltwater pools?
I do manage saltwater pools, and you always have to test those pools. You do have to keep your stabilizer up. The chlorinators, I can't really rely on them. The salt generators, they're really good in big pools, like enormous pools, and in smaller pools, I don't really like them so much because there's so many issues that they break down after a couple of years. They're quite expensive, and I'd rather just use my chemicals to do a normal pool. Okay.
So you started with more of a homemade copper ionizer. How did you do that? What was your technique?
I used a blue and white tablet floater, chlorine floater, and I put a little solar panel on top of it, and I ran 2 copper hollow pipes in there, and I fixed the wires to each one. I separated them with twist ties.
Gotcha.
So I had the copper tubes inside the floater, and I velcroed the top of it, the solar panel, to the floater itself, and it worked really great. A lot of customers were like, I can't believe how blue my pool looks. It's so clear. So they work.
Interesting. And how much did that cost in terms of just the raw materials to DIY?
$25.
Wow, interesting. And if I recall, the copper ionizer that we have, let me get it real quick. All right, so this is the ionizer that we had in our pool, and it's been taken out for a little bit, but you can see kind of what Paul was talking about, where you basically have the solar element, and then this has been completely oxidized over the last year or so. There's a lot of kind of blue copper remnants here. Just to make some additional recommendations, you said the $125 price point might be the sweet spot, and any particular brands that you found to be better than others?
Remington is what I would recommend.
Great. And I think the one that I have is it's Ionizer Buddy. It's No More Green, and that one also seemed to work pretty well.
Works really good. Worked fantastically.
Great. But it has been taken out of our pool. So, what prompted you to start removing these, and how many of the 40 pools are still using copper, if any?
None of them are used. I'm not using 0. I have 0 of them in my pools right now. 3 of the pools were damaged. one customer had the floater tied to something by the side of their pool, and the return was blowing water through it. And you'd think that would be okay, but then all of a sudden this black streak came on south from that flow and stained out the pool. And when it stains it out, it does it quickly. Like you can be there 1 week and see a little mark, and then next week you can have a huge black copper streak on your pool. It's very hard to get out. They're best used with muriatic acid in there, and then once you do have this issue, you do have to use sequestering agents and more muriatic acid, and you have to brush them out really hard. So these devices do like acid to be put into the pool, and also cleaning them every week. You take it apart, you clean out this system, you screw it back together, and cleaning 40 of them every week gets your hands pretty dirty. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So they do require a lot of kind of physical labor to kind of scrub the copper, element and get rid of any of the anodized metal off. So overall, would you say that you are spending more time maintaining the pools with the ionizers in, or same time or less?
I was actually spending more time.
More time.
Yeah, it takes about 3, maybe 4 minutes to clean the right way
Okay.
and set back up. Sure, so let's say an average pool will get a jug of chlorine for 9 months out of the year every week down here. And during that period of time, I was able to scale back the chlorine usage. I was giving my pool sometimes no chlorine, sometimes half a gallon, sometimes a gallon, to disinfect the pool. Because this does not kill bacteria, as far as I know, it just kills
Algae.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There probably is some sort of bactericidal element to the copper, and that was something that some of you commented on in my last video about whether it really is effective as a one and done. And in reality, it probably is not. So let's get back to the point that you raised, which is that none of the 40 pools currently still have copper in it, including mine, which was removed a few weeks ago. And the main reason was because of the 3 that had that black deposition. Is that right?
Yes, correct. So that's less than, if you do it, let's say I had 3 pools not look good out of 40, 45, that's still a fairly low percentage rate of only maybe 6, 7% not looking so good, but I can't afford to have that happen to my customers, and maybe it was going to continue and happen to more swimming pools, and I'd have to work extremely hard to correct this issue. The original pool, there was a gal down the street, and she bought one. It was the first pool. It was like 5 years ago by now, and I was like, oh, here we go. It's not going to work. But it worked great. Her floater worked great for like 3 years, and then all of a sudden we started to have issues with her pool, and she's taken hers out now. But it's not to say that I do like this product. I really love this product from time to time. But then when you start to get a couple of issues with it, you fall out of love with it. Mm-hmm. So I really have liked this product. I made like 30 or 40 of them. I repaired those over time. I love what it does to pools. So it's just one of those things. With the stabilizer disappearing from the market, I had to try this, and I really had my hopes set high, and they were kind of,
tempered a little bit.
Yeah,
I gotcha. I guess in some, they are good for most of the clients, but the risk of having some really devastating or challenging complication might be too high. Is that a fair summary?
It's a fair summary, and yes, it is, because let's say the average homeowner does his pool, let's say once a week, once every 10 days. Well, I've done well over 100,000 service calls, and I've got, true problems with a few of my pools. So if I can mess up, anybody can mess up, and it's easy to do. And when we do test for the copper levels in the pool, I basically get the lowest possible reading on the test strips that you can get. So you feel like you're safe, you're okay, and that you can add some chlorine, but you don't know how much chlorine is too much chlorine to put in before the chlorine will push the copper to the walls.
Gotcha. So do you feel that the copper and chlorine ratios is what tipped some pools into their imbalance, and is finding that sweet spot the real challenge?
Yep, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Okay. Where is that sweet spot? It's hard to measure, it's hard to know, and It's tricky.
Gotcha. So even in those 3 pools that had the black deposition, the measured amount of copper ions was still below the reading?
It was still quite low. Still quite low.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I think that the test strips will recommend below, zero point 0.4, 0.5 parts per million, as I mentioned in the other video, and I guess, you can be lulled into a false sense of security.
That's true. And when I do have these issues, what I have to do is start using sequestering agents, less chlorine, and then once you suspend that copper that's on the walls back into the pool, then use less chlorine, because that's now back into the pool acting as a clarifier, algicide.
Yep.
And so it's not always gone. So we've had to wait a period of time now. Let's say I removed them about 2 months ago. So we've had maybe about a foot of water added to the pools in that month or two.
Mm-hmm.
So it's becoming diluted. So now I can get back more and more to my normal routine of taking care of pools.
Gotcha. And for the pools now that have been transitioning away from the copper to a more standard regimen, how has that process been? Has that been a challenge? Have you found, again, to recalibrate your use of stabilizers and chlorine and acid?
Yeah, it's been really tricky. It's been really tricky, like guesswork. Mm-hmm. I'll go up to a normal pool that I would usually give a full jug of chlorine to, and I'll give it a half a jug of chlorine. At first, I was just giving them, which is a gallon and a half about. Then some pools I would even give a half a gallon to, and then a gallon to, and then slowly ramp them up to where they should be. Mm. So that's challenging. And then getting the stabilizer back into the pools, and not overcooking the pools with that, because I could push the copper to the walls if I were to overcook them.
I see. So for a pool that's kind of, I guess, experiencing a little green tinge, and people might be looking at these ionizers as a way to get the algae down, are they still a product that you would recommend with caution?
Yeah, definitely. I think that you can use them for a period of time. I'd use them no longer than, let's say, 6 weeks at a time. And then that way you can raise your copper levels in the pool, take it out, remove it, separate it like this so that element doesn't keep burning, clean it, store it in a dark place, and then let the copper drift back down again. So for a month, 2 months, fine, but then take it back out, reuse it. And I think that would work pretty good if they have an algae problem, this, that, and the other thing. But I also do recommend using a superphosphate destroyer, especially down here in Florida for pools. That seems to work really good at handling algae.
Any seasonal variation based on summer months versus winter months, sun exposure, things like that? Are there certain things that people might need to be cautious of as they start using these, depending on the time of year?
Yes, down here in Florida, we start to use more liquid chlorine in the springtime and summertime because we are going to heat up and the pools get to be about 85 degrees or so. With bathers in the pool, it's easy to get algae, and then we start to force a habit to use more liquid chlorine. So you have to be bold if you're going to go with this product. Just go with this product if you're going to go with it, and stay away from the liquid chlorine completely. Stay away from the tablets completely, and just use phosphate destroyer, muriatic acid, and keep your stabilizer at 0, which is what they recommend.
Real quick, as far as the general ratios of chemicals and stabilizers, just quickly summarize what your typical routine is, what your targets are for a pool not using the ionizers and pools that are.
Not using the ionizers, full jug of liquid chlorine, which is 2.5 gallons. Checking the pH, giving it a shot of muriatic acid if it needs it. Definitely a shot of superphosphate destroyer every week. With the ionizer in there, very, very super little chlorine, no more than a half a gallon. And use some acid, use the superphos out, and do not use stabilizer.
Gotcha. So, and stay away from any tablets or any kind of continuous chlorine releasers as well, right?
Tablets might be a good idea, actually, because they are slow release, and they're not a boom shock.
Okay.
And they might be okay, but they do contain stabilizer in them. Probably about 50%. It's very close to what a chlorine tablet has and we've looked into it. We don't know if it's 45%, 50, 55% stabilizer, so I just call it 50%. So, yeah, you can use tablets, and that would be less risky than using liquid.
Great to know. And you mentioned you want to keep the pH a little lower when using these ionizers?
Yes, around 7.3, 7.4, and when I'm using chlorine, I can let the pH go up to 7.7, 7.8, and the pools are still fine. But above 8.0, I find I have to use some acid.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, Paul. Great seeing you as always, neighbor. And thanks for you guys watching, and comment below on your experience with these ionizers. Thanks again. Bye.